The grand lecture hall at Harvard University was filled with murmuring students. The quiet rustle of notebooks flipping and the soft tapping of fingers against desks echoing through the space. Rows of young scholars sat attentively, some leaning forward with curiosity, others merely fulfilling their class requirements. At the front of the hall, displayed in bold white letters against a massive projector screen, was today's lecture title, "Can Science Explain Everything?" Professor Michael Graves stood at the podium, hands gripping its edges as he gazed across the room with sharp, analytical eyes. Dressed in a sleek gray suit, his expression carried a trace of amusement, as though he already knew how this discussion would unfold. He wasn't just a professor, he was a performer. Known across campus for his fiery debates, his lectures often resembled courtroom trials, and his favorite target? Religion. "All right, students." His voice carried effortlessly through the hall, silencing side conversations. "Today, we're discussing science and belief. And I have a question for you: can science truly explain everything?" A few students nodded, others seemed hesitant. The professor leaned slightly against the podium, his lips curving into a familiar smirk. "And what about God? Can we prove his existence? Or is he merely a creation of human imagination?" Soft chuckles rippled through parts of the audience. Some had heard this argument before and knew how it would end. Then, from the back of the hall, someone quietly raised their hand. Lucas Carter. Lucas wasn't the kind of student who usually spoke up in class. He was the quiet observer, always present but rarely noticed. But today, something in him urged him to break his silence. He slowly lifted his hand. The murmurs died down. A few students turned to see who had dared to challenge the professor. Professor Graves raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Ah, Mr. Carter, go ahead." Lucas took a deep breath and spoke in an even, composed tone. "Professor, we all understand how science works, but I have a question. Can science really explain everything?" The professor nodded slightly, his smirk unwavering. "Science has answered many questions so far. And for those it hasn't yet, we will eventually find answers." Lucas nodded back, his face unreadable. "But what if there are things science will never be able to explain?" The room went still. A few students exchanged glances. The professor crossed his arms, intrigued but confident. "Such as?" Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out an old coin. He rolled it between his fingers, watching the light bounce off its worn edges. "Science can tell me what this coin is made of. It can describe its physical properties. But can it tell me what this coin means to me?" A murmur spread through the room. "Science can explain the chemical processes behind emotions, but can it truly define why a mother, after holding her child for the first time, feels something so profound that words fail to capture it?" Professor Graves exhaled slowly, as if contemplating his next move. "Emotions are simply chemical reactions in the brain, Mr. Carter. Love, joy, sadness, all just the result of neurotransmitters at work." Lucas tilted his head slightly, considering his words. "Then let me ask you this. If everything we feel is just the result of chemicals, why do people willingly sacrifice everything for love while others walk away without a second thought? If love is just a formula, why doesn't everyone experience it the same way?" The tension in the room grew thicker. Lucas locked eyes with the professor. Science answers the how, but it does not answer the why. And that is where human reason and soul come into play. Professor Graves shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. "So you're saying science only scratches the surface?" Lucas gave a small, knowing smile. "Science can take us to the door of truth, but it is up to us whether we open it or not." A deep silence settled over the lecture hall. Professor Graves sighed and looked away for a brief moment. The confidence that once filled his expression seemed to fade slightly. Perhaps some questions simply aren't meant to have answers yet. As the lecture ended, students slowly gathered their belongings, their usual chatter replaced by quiet reflection. Some stole glances at Lucas, as if seeing him in a new light. That quiet, unnoticed student had just done what no one else had dared to do. And sometimes, asking the right question is what sparks the greatest change. Some questions are bigger than science. Some truths are deeper than formulas and equations. What do you believe? If this story made you think, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and make you see the world in a new way. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. See you in the next story.